Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm Andrea Botner, the Donald G. Combs Science Director at GMGI, and it's my pleasure to be bringing you tonight's Science Hour. I'm especially happy to be bringing you this Science Hour from GMGI's beautiful research facility on Gloucester Harbor instead of from my basement. And I'm thrilled to be introducing tonight's speaker, Dr. David Wiley. Dave is the research coordinator for NOAA's Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary, where he's been investigating the marine environment for more than 16 years. He received his Ph.D. in environmental sciences from Antioch University and currently holds adjunct faculty positions at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, as well as Oregon State University. Dave is a baleen whale expert, and his research focuses on studying reproductive and foraging ecology of endangered whales using novel technologies to explore their underwater behaviors. His results have been published in numerous scientific journals, and he is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Switzer Environmental Leadership Award, the Gulf of Maine Visionary Award, and the U.S. Department of Commerce Individual Gold Medal for Scientific Leadership. His research has been featured on the Discovery Channel, BBC documentaries, National Geographic, the National Public Television and Radio, and he was profiled in the recently published Wildlife Heroes as one of the 40 top wildlife conservationists of our time. So it's really an honor to have Dave with us this evening. And I'm going to turn things over to Dave now, and I will reappear at the end of Dave's talk to guide us through some questions. So thanks very much to everyone who has sent questions in ahead of time for this talk. If you'd like to send questions in during the talk, just use the Q&A function on your screen. We'll try to get to all the questions tonight. If we don't, please follow up with an email to Ashley Destino, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered for you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dave Wiley. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we're looking forward to your talk, which is entitled Using Advanced Technologies to Explore the Underwater Behavior of Humpback Whales.
Thanks for having me. This is really a treat. You know, what you guys have done up there in Gloucester is really quite incredible. And to be invited to talk in this series is really a nice thing. I'm really excited to do it. So I am going to figure out how to show my screen here, and then we'll get the presentation going, hopefully. Okay, can everybody see that screen okay?
Looks great.
Okay, good. Okay, you know, like any large project, there's lots and lots of people involved. And the principals are, in addition to myself, Mike Thompson, who works with me at the Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary, Dr. Ari Friedlander at University of California, Santa Cruz, Susan Parks at Syracuse University, and Colin Ware, who's at UNH at the Center for Coastal Ocean Mapping. And as you'll see at the end, there's lots and lots of people in addition to these principals that really contribute to this project. These days, you cannot do work by yourself. You have to have large collaborations pulling upon the expertise of lots and lots of different scientists and technicians, and we're lucky enough to have some of the best. For those of you who aren't familiar with the sanctuary system, Stellwagen Bank Natural Marine Sanctuary is part of a whole family of natural marine sanctuaries that are really throughout the coastal areas of the United States, and you know, we kind of consider them the crown jewels of the marine environment for the U.S. And here you can see a bunch of them located around the country. We're the only one in New England. And right off the coast of Massachusetts here, I think most of you people are probably familiar with the sanctuary, so I won't go into too much, but it really is a special place. It was considered the best place in the country for viewing marine wildlife in a USA Today poll of a couple of years ago. So as you were told, my expertise is really the behavior of baleen whales. And if you're going to study animals, wildlife in general, you really want to be able to watch them. This is some great video of humpback whales actually taken in Hawaii. Of course, we don't get to watch whales like this. These animals are in nice clear water, and probably mostly because it's not particularly productive. So you get these nice clear waters in these breeding grounds for humpback whales because they're not feeding on anything. Up here, we're a feeding ground, and because it's very productive, visibility because of plankton is usually on the order of maybe 10 to 15 meters. So we don't get to see whales like this in our research. So we have to depend on technology to try to look at the animals. So these are some of the different tags that we put on the animals. They each have their own little specialty. Most of them have pitch, roll, and heading sensors, so we know how deep the animals are and how they're turning and moving their bodies. Some of them have hydrophones in them, so we know all the sounds the animals are making and the sounds that they're hearing, concurrent with these body movements and behaviors. And others have video capabilities. So we're looking at the pitch, roll, heading, and the animals, and also seeing what is around them at the same time. So these are the various things that we attach to whales to try to figure out what they're doing underwater because we can't see them. We use mostly our own research vessel, the NOAA research vessel RV Auk. Here we are having one of our tagged whales swim past the Auk. So it's about 50 foot long, and we use it to collect a lot of data and also launch other boats or tow other boats for this particular project. To put the tags on, we actually use a long pole, and we have to maneuver very carefully up along beside the animals and put the tags on. The tags have a suction cup on them, so there's no penetration. I'm kind of a Bambi when it comes to research. I really don't like to, to anything that penetrates the animals. So it's a suction cup. You can kind of think of it, when a kid has a dart gun and shoots somebody in the forehead and the dart sticks there. That's kind of the way these tags work. So this is Ari Friedlander and myself putting a tag on one of our humpback whales. This is kind of how it happens in real life. These animals are engaged in bubble net feeding, which kind of slows them down a little bit. So we carefully maneuver up next to them and put the tag on their back. If the animals are bottom feeding, they're a little more active and erratic in their behavior. So we have to move a little bit more quickly to get close to them. The nice thing about the bubble nets is that they're giving you this nice spot where you know the whales are going to come up. If they're bottom feeding, they don't give any telltale bubbles that precedes them to the surface. So it's a little more difficult. This is Leah Crow, who's part of our team. And she's going to, again, use the tag is on the tip of that pole. So she's going to wait until we get close enough to the animal, push that pole out the full length, and then put the tag on the animal's back again. So once the tag is on the animal's back, again, it's attached with suction cups, and they'll stay on anywhere from only a couple of minutes if the animal rolls or bumps into another whale and it comes off. The longest we've had a tag stay on is 38 hours. And our goal is more and more, of course, to keep animals with the tags on for at least 24 hours. We want to get an entire light and dark cycle from the animals so we can start calculating energy budgets and how they're behaving through a light-dark cycle. And we've worked a lot with different suction cup types and innovations to try to get those suction cups to stay on as long as possible. And again, we're now routinely getting attachments in the 20 to almost 40-hour range. Once the tags are on, we take a great deal of data to go with that. Up in that top left-hand corner, you can see some VHF tracking. The tags themselves have a little VHF transmitter in them, which sends out a signal that we can then use to locate them. We also use that signal to locate the tags once they come off. So they come off in the ocean, sometimes at night when we're not around, sometimes in the fog when we're not around. And using the VHF tracking system, we can hone in and pick that tag up out of the water in the middle of the night or in the middle of fog or whatever the conditions are. We then have to take the tag and attach it to our computers and download the data. All the data is archived in the tag itself. It doesn't telemeter anything back to us. So we have to regain the tags to download all the data, and then we put them back out again. We also use these nice fancy laser range finding binoculars to get the lat and long of the animals. And also we then take behavioral sequencing data. So every time the animal's on the surface, we take data in an ethogram created by Mason Weinrich of the Whale Center of New England. And that lets us know what the animals are doing at the surface that we can then tie to what the animals are doing subsurface. The tags that we've developed over the last year or two have fast lock GPS on them, so we're able to get those location data independent of our own laser range finding capabilities, which has been hugely important because now we can also get the location of the animals at night, where we couldn't earlier using just the laser rangefinders. We're still unable, of course, to do behavioral sequencing at night, but we do it as much as we can during the day because it's really important to be able to tie the underwater data to the surfacing behaviors that we're recording. Now, once we get the tag data back, Colin Ware at the University of New Hampshire created this great visualization program for us called Track Plot. Here you're looking at a 3D track plot creation of the track of the animal as it's swimming with all these different behaviors. So this is not an animation. These are actually pulled out of the track data, and Colin creates this 3D rendering of what the animals are doing with the tag on them. So here you can see an animal swimming across the surface. Then it's going to dive down. Now it's going to be along the bottom. These little polygons that you can see, the red and blue polygons, are fluke strokes. So every time the animal moves its flukes up and down, it retains, the tag retains that in its record, and Colin is able to pull those out. Down here in the lower left that I just put up is a scattergram or scatter plot of the orientations of the animals. And you can see there's a bimodal distribution there. Most of them, the pitch rolls are 0, 0, and that is in this body orientation, the normal dorsal ventral swimming orientation that you think of with whales. But you can see the second cluster down here at about 90-degree roll and 30 to 40-degree pitch. And that is occurring in all of these locations here. So here you have the animal rolled 90 degrees and pitched maybe 30 to 40 degrees down. And this is the body orientation in all of these little folds that you're seeing at the bottom. So when the animals are going down to the bottom, they're frequently rolling onto their sides and orienting themselves head down. So that's kind of an interesting behavior. This is several hours in the life of a humpback whale. These bottom roll events are color-coded yellow in this case. You can see various ones here. And the animals will stay on their sides and oriented head down on their sides for maybe 10 to 20 seconds. You can see that in this, these histograms here. So what are the animals doing down there? Well, down in the bottom, there's all these little fish called sand lance that bury themselves into the bottom. The animals have scuff marks on their faces. You can see one here. And so if the animals are head down at this angle, this scuffing mark would be right about where they contact the bottom. And these are a lot of rolls that this animal is making. So one of the ideas is that they're doing it preferentially over sand habitats. One of the nice things about the sanctuary is we've got a lot of different data sets that we can apply to understanding these behaviors. And one of them we have from Paige Valentine of USGS is high resolution bottom sediment maps. So here you can see gray is being gravel substrate, tan is sand, and brown is mud. And you can see that these bottom roll behaviors occur primarily over the sand habitat. So what's going on down there? And why would a humpback want to roll and orient head down in the sand? This is some of our work on sand lance. Well, there are all these nice little fish that are maybe 6 inches long, maybe weigh 15 grams or so, maybe about this, big around as your thumb. And they're just really nice lipid-rich fish. The problem is that as you can see here, they bury themselves in the sand, come rocketing out of the sand, and can dive back into the sand very quickly. So it's kind of tough if you're a whale trying to catch a fish with those escape capabilities. But it certainly seems that the sand habitat that the whales occupy is the same habitat that sand lance occur in, and they occur in the same areas that the whales like to feed. So if you're going to be a whale, how are you going to catch a fast-moving fish that dives in and out of the sand? So one of the things we try to do is attach tags to multiple animals in the same feeding group. It's hard enough to get a tag on a single animal, so it's even harder to attach another animal or tag to another animal in that group because they kind of know what you're trying to do at that point and they become a little more evasive. But these are actually two whales that you're seeing here. To the untrained eye, they may look like little glyphs or polywogs, one red and one blue. But trust me, these are actually whales, one red and one blue. And these are 4 dive sequences from 2 animals that are each tagged at the same time, and they're working together. So here you can see an animal, these 2 animals are going down, they're at the surface together, they're diving down, and what the data tell us is at the bottom, they're going head to head. So there's a dive, they go back up to the surface together, they dive together, they go down to the bottom, supposedly go head to head, surface, and do this over and over again. So at the bottom, it looks kind of like this, with the 2 animals rolled side 90 degrees, 30 to 40 degrees down, and oriented head to head. So that's pretty interesting behavior. That's what the tag data showed us. I wasn't positive I believed it because we really couldn't see what was going on. We did have some other things to look at. So for instance, Susan Parks from our team, as I said, one of the tags called the D tag has really good acoustics in it. So we can get lots of information about the sounds that the animals are making and what they're doing when they're making it. So she found that the animals are making this call that we call a double pulse. It kind of goes ba-boom, ba-boom. And they make that call at night when they're bottom feeding. So here you can see animals that are feeding right along the bottom, and that's where they're making this call at night. They also make that call if they're bottom feeding in very deep water. So here you can see animals that are feeding at about 80 meters depth, and they're making that call. And they also make the call when there's another humpback nearby. If they do this bottom feeding and they're by themselves, they don't make that call. So again, they make the call at night or in very deep water. And the similarity in those 2 cases is that it's extremely dark, both at night and in deep water. So they really can't see each other. And they make the call if there's another humpback whale nearby when they're doing this rolling and head down behavior. And interestingly, as I said, they didn't produce the call when they're alone, and they also don't produce the call when they're in shallow water. So it seems if they're by themselves or if they actually have enough visibility that can see each other, they don't make the call. They do make the call at night in conditions that they can't see each other if there's other whales there. So we speculated that it's possible that that call is used to coordinate their behavior if they can't see each other. Now, another piece that was interesting in this puzzle, here's a series of dives along the bottom here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dives. This is right around midnight. And with the hydrophones, we can also hear other noises that are in the area. So here you see a spectrogram along the top. These bright red places are where the sound gets louder. So these spikes here that you're seeing when the animals surface is because when the tag breaks the surface, there's a lot of sound splashing and things. So that's these spikes. And then this sound here is a boat passing by. See, it's filling in between the spikes when the animals are surfacing. So this is when a boat is going to come by and be very loud. So we can look here, the animal's going to dive, not too much noise, and it makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 side rolls, comes up, takes a breath, again, not too much noise, goes down, 1, 2, 3, 4 side rolls, comes up, lots of noise from a passing vessel, it dives, but it doesn't do any side rolls at all, comes back up, the ship goes away, less sound, and it goes back to doing side roll feeding. So it seems if they can't hear each other, the behavior is curtailed when noise makes that double pulse call. So more and more, we were thinking that this call is used to coordinate the behavior of these animals when they're on the bottom so they can feed as a group. So we decided we really needed to actually see what was going on. So the first thing we were able to get is a National Geographic critter cam. And so that required us to put 2 tags on at the same time. our D tag, which had the good acoustic properties, and then the critter cam, which has the good video properties. So in this case, we had to maneuver close enough to the animals and carefully enough to actually apply not one, but two tags. Now, of course, we don't show you the many, many hours that it takes us to actually get close enough to put a tag on. It looks like it's really easy, but sometimes we can go an entire day without getting a single tag on. So often it takes several hours just to get a single tag on, let alone putting two tags on, which is even more difficult. So there our whale is, all tricked out with its critter cam video camera and our D tag. And after we did this, the animal that it was with decided to take a nap. So they all went to sleep. Now, that's a little bit frustrating, of course, because what we wanted to see what they were doing subsurface, but it was also really important because one of the problems with using technology like tags is you get lots of data, but your sample size is quite small. So your N is not really large and robust. So one of the worries is that the tag itself will change the behavior of the animal. Excuse me. So the fact that this animal with the tags on decided to go to sleep for about an hour and a half really gave us confidence that what we were going to be seeing is real, natural, undisturbed behavior on the part of the whales. So I'm not going to be able to show you some of the great video that we got because it's being published soon. So we really can't show it, but I will show you this part. And this is a bit of a screen grab from one of the video cameras, some of the footage. And you can see, sure enough, these two whales, there's one whale here, its head. There's the other whale and its head. The camera is actually on the back of this whale right about here. And you can see they actually are going head to head along the bottom. And these particular animals were not making any calls. Again, our hypothesis being if it's light enough at the bottom that they can see each other, they do not have to make that double pulse coordinated call, and they're just coordinating their behavior visually. So we're just about to put this paper out for publication, and I'll let you folks know when it comes out, and you can get a little bit more information about this when that happens. So that's what they're doing when they're bottom feeding. But of course, most people are familiar with humpback whales and their famous bubble net feeding. And when we started out our tagging project, this is what we wanted to learn about, was this famous bubble net feeding behavior, which everybody sees, but nobody really knew much about. There's only, I think, 1 or 2 papers out describing bubble net feeding, none of them knowing what the animals did underwater. This whole bottom feeding stuff that we've encountered was pretty much new. There was only one paper that speculated on the humpback whales at bottom feed based on the scuffing on their faces, on their jaws, but no information really on how it occurred. So we really have enjoyed learning and exploring that particular behavior. But of course, bubble netting is really spectacular, and we've got some great information on how humpback whales make bubbles to capture prey. In this case, sand lance as well. So this is taken from a blimp that we were working with Bill Lang from Woods Hole, and you can see very nicely the spiral shape that the whales blow when they're creating these bubble nets to trap the fish. And this is a track plot version of the same thing. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. So here you can see that multiple animals can make the bubble nets. We've got at least 2 here that are blowing parts of the net. And you'll see here in a minute that some animals contribute more than others to the process of making nets. We've had as many as 10 animals. I think 11 is our record that have been inside one of these bubble nets. So they really do 2 main styles of feeding when they're using these bubble nets. One is an upward spiral that you're seeing here on the left, and the other is what we call a double loop process that you're seeing here on the right. So the upward spiral, the animals basically go underneath a school of fish and then start blowing out bubbles here and just continually bubble as they're swimming towards the surface in a tighter and tighter circle. And then they'll come up through that with their mouths open and capture the fish. The other, what we call double loop feeding, double loop because there are 2 loops. So here's the first loop, we call it the capture loop. It's a deep net, and they'll start blowing the bubbles here and form a circle. Then they'll come up, they'll slam their tail flukes onto the surface and then duck down and come up through that net with their mouths open and gape and capture the fish again. So here we have a track plot visualization of how that double loop works. Animal was blowing bubbles there, slammed its tail flukes down, ducking under and coming up. Again, they're going to go down, start blowing bubbles right here when they're making that turn. Bubble, 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 bubble. Come up, slam the tail flukes down, and then duck down and come up through that net again. So it's a three-step process: corral loop, lob tail, and capture loop. Now, what's kind of cool, you know, I always hesitate to show numbers, but these numbers are so fun, I'll do it anyway. What we're looking here is the depth that animals blow this large loop at. And here we have 4 different animals. This is the number of dives: 26, 218, 66, 54. And if you look at this, it's really stunning. The deepest point for this large capture, or excuse me, corral loop is 21.7 meters, 21.6 meters, 22.2 meters, 20.6 meters. Those are almost identical numbers and very, very close. Very little, you know, variance is very tight. So that's really, really interesting that, you know, the loop is blown almost the same depth for all of these animals with very little variance. One of my friends from Alaska, Fred Sharp, was also investigating bubble net behavior, and he made his own bubble nets by taking PVC pipe and drilling holes in them and then forcing air through it to create bubbles. And what Fred found is that if you have a net that's deeper than 20 meters, because there's a bunch of different size bubbles, the physics of bubble dispersion is that different size bubbles will travel at different speeds towards the surface. And what Fred found was at deeper than 20 meters, the fast bubbles outpace the slow bubbles and leave big gaps. So the physics of bubble dispersion says that you can't have a bubble net that's deeper than 20 meters. So here you can see pretty nicely that humpback whale behavior is adhering to the physics of bubble dispersion, which I think is pretty cool. This is what we used to call the lunge loop, but we now call the capture loop. These are these little ones up here. And again, if you look at the depth, 12.44 meters, variance 1.2 meters, 12.24, 13.6, 12.0 with very little variance. And this was surprising until we realized that really that's just the length of the animal. And so what is happening is the animals are just swimming a body length down, turning up through the net and going through to capture the fish. So again, these lengths or depths with this very tight variance is really looking at what is the length of that animal. So numbers, but I think very cool numbers. This is one of Colin's track plot visualizations of a spiral loop. Animal's going to dive down, locate the school of prey, and then start swimming those concentric circles, and then rise through that net and capture the prey. This is another one of Colin's inventions called GeoZooey 4Z. And the great thing about GeoZooey is it can take any time-varying geospatial data and combine these different data sets together. So here you've got 2 humpback whales that are tagged. This is an EK60 map of prey schools. So this animal is going down about 20 meters. If you listen carefully, you can actually hear bubbling, trickling. I'll be quiet here, and you'll be able to hear the bubbles coming out of the animal's blowhole. That trickling sound. So it's going to do a double loop maneuver here. This other animal is just kind of hanging out, doing nothing. Now it's going to do its capture loop. This animal has not been doing anything. But now it's going to go and beat that animal up through the bubble net that it created. Now, what's interesting is that we were able to follow these animals, and we know who they are by their by different body part markings, so we know exactly who these animals are. This animal that was mooching would move from bubble net group to bubble net group. She'd stay with one group for maybe 2 or 3 surfacings and then move on to another one, as if she was more parasitizing that net than actually helping. And when we looked at her swim patterns, she only showed these really linear movements up through the bubble net, no spiraling and not blowing any bubbles from her listening to the recordings. So in that case, the animal really seemed to be parasitizing the net. Now, here's 2 animals. This is sped up so we don't have to wait again. That actually, last one was in real time. These 2 animals stay together for many, many hours, and you can see very, very different behavior with the animals repeatedly going over and making these movements that both contributed listening to the bubbles in their hydrophone recording, and they're both contributing bubbles at different parts of the net. So in this case, it seems like they're being quite cooperative. So that's one of the fun things about humpback whales, is that they do lots and lots of different things. Sometimes they're cooperative, sometimes they're not cooperative. It just depends on what seems to be advantageous for that particular animal at that moment. Because the animal that you saw being parasitic and mooching, in the frame, the slide before this, we've got great data on her being extremely, well, part of a cooperative group, bottom feeding on a different occasion. So just because you're somewhat parasitic in one situation doesn't mean that you're a mooch in all conditions. This is some work by Ari Friedlander from our team. And this year we were looking at the timing of bubble netting versus bottom feeding. And this year it was very clear. The yellow marks are the number of bubble feeding events, and they were only during the day. And the bottom feeding events in the red were during the night and very few during the day. That was very clear in that year. The lack of bubble netting during night is still fairly clear. But the animals will feed along the bottom in the daytime as well as the night, although at night it's their predominant behavior. So nighttime is only bottom feeding, daytime can be bubble net feeding or bottom feeding, really depending on where the sand lance are, as you'll see in the next slide. So here again, here you're looking at a time depth recording of a tagged animal, and here it is during the daytime doing primarily bubble net feeding. And if we come down here, this is an EK60 data on what the sand lance were doing at that time. This is a sand lance map with heavy concentrations being red, no sand lance being white. And here you can see in the daytime, the sand lance are up in the water column, the whales are up in the water column, and you can see them using these bubble net behaviors during that daytime period. At nighttime, starting at dusk around 8:30 or so, the animals go down and start feeding along the bottom. This is a depiction of this particular animal bottom feeding, and the sand lance, you can see, instead of being up in the water column, are here along the bottom. So the humpback whales are following down to the bottom to feed effectively in day or night conditions. So we can use these data to look at how vulnerable humpback whales to certain human activities. So for instance, we have data on shipping in this area, and the average depth of the draft of a ship is around 9.1 meters. So we can look at how much time humpback whales are spending within 9.1 meters of the surface. We can also look at, we've got a lot of lobster gear and gill nets that are set along the bottom, and we can look at how much time a humpback whale spends within 5 meters of the bottom. And then, of course, there are vertical lines that go from buoys at the surface down to the bottom, and we can look at how much time they spend, in the entire water column. So using those data, we can look at how vulnerable they are to being hit by a boat. And this is how much time they're spending at what portion of the water column based on the hour of the day from 0 to 24 hours. And here you can see the highest is about 53% of their time. They're spending that top 9%, or excuse me, 9 meters of the water column in that 9 to 10 o'clock area. The least time that they're least vulnerable to being hit by a boat would be in the nighttime, that 10 to 11 o'clock time frame, where they're only about 7% of their time are they up in that top portion of the water column. So again, what are they doing at that point? They're doing all these bubble behaviors and breathing. So they're doing all these things in the surface portion of the water column. If you look at how much time that they're spending on an average, about 41% of a 24-hour period for humpback whale is spent in that top 9 meters of the water column and vulnerable to ship strikes. So a lot of their time, they're in that top portion where they could get hit by a boat. Looking at how much time they're spending in the bottom 5 meters of the water column, ranges from about 50% of their time in that nighttime behavior. Here, again, that 10 to 11 to 12 o'clock time, about 50%. And if you look in that morning hours, really, they're not spending too much time along the bottom at all during that morning period for this particular data set. And again, what are they doing down there? Well, they're bottom feeding. That's what they're doing in that time period, chasing those sand lance down towards the bottom. If you look on a 24-hour basis, they're spending about 22% of their time on the bottom, where they'd be vulnerable to getting caught in bottom tended gear. So we want to combine those things. So in a humpback whale's life, how much time does it spend on a 24-hour period in Stellwagen Bank and the surrounding waters, vulnerable to being entangled or hit by a boat? Well, it's pretty substantial. In all but 2 of the 24-hour periods, humpbacks spend over 50% of their time vulnerable to getting hit by a boat or entangled in fishing gear. So that's pretty dramatic. In 6 of the 24-hour periods, they spend over 70% of their time vulnerable to be getting hit by a boat or entangled in bottom fishing gear. Of course, the vertical lines that are going from the bottom, from the top right to the bottom, well, you know, that goes through the entire water column. So 100% of their time they're spending vulnerable to being caught in the vertical lines from bottom set fishing gears. So we don't have enough time to go into a lot of things that are being done by NOAA to try to reduce these risks, but these are the websites that you can go to learn more about it. So actions to reduce ship strikes are at these websites. Actions to reduce entanglement are at this website here. So we can make those available, but if you just Google NOAA ship strikes and NOAA entanglement, you can probably find those pretty easily. One of the things that we did at the sanctuary using our data is that we worked with the Massport U.S. Coast Guard and the what's called the Boston Port Operators Group, which is made up of all the maritime industry that accesses the Port of Boston. And we worked very closely together to try to reduce the risk of whales being hit by ships in the sanctuary and around the sanctuary. Here you're looking at a map that Mike Thompson made. The red areas and yellow areas have lots of whales. The blue and light blue areas don't have many whales. The shipping lanes, when we started this activity, if you look at my arrow, we're running right through this area, which is really the highest use area for whales in the sanctuary. So we worked to use our data to map out where whales were likely to be and where they weren't likely to be. And then we worked with the maritime industry and NOAA and the Coast Guard to come up with a new route through the sanctuary that reduced co-occurrence of whales and ships by about 86%. And we haven't had any. We possibly had 1 ship strike last year. We're waiting for those data. But since we did this in 2007, we really have had potentially 1 ship strike, and that's it. So really a successful project. As I said in the beginning, it takes a lot of people to do all the things that I just mentioned. Funding is from the Volgenau Foundation and International Fund for Animal Welfare. So really indebted to those 2 groups, as well as the Office of Naval Research, Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary, of course, and the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. This is a big part of our team. The nice thing is that we all get together. It's really a family situation. So we come together each year right about this time. Unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, we've had to cancel our whale tagging expedition and cruise for this year. So we're all quite disappointed about that. But it's a great team of great scientists and technicians, and we've been extremely successful. I think we're up to our 16th publication. These are some of the publications in various top-tier journals that we've produced over the lifetime of this particular project that have been very helpful for both understanding the behavioral ecology of humpback whales, but also, of course, their conservation. So I think I've used up my time, but I'd be really happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. And I'll put it back to, if I can figure out how to do this. I'm supposed to think. Here we are. I am going to turn off my show screen.
Thanks very much, Dave. That was great. Really exciting work.
That did not get rid of that. Maybe.
I'm looking for the stop share.
Yes, I'm looking for the stop share. And I saw it before. Stop showing screen. There we go. Is it gone?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was great. Really exciting work. We have a number of questions here. Before we get started, I actually have a question because it was really exciting watching you tag the whales. I'm wondering how you retrieve those tags.
Yeah, it's really a bit of a challenge. They float to the surface, and there's that little VHF beacon that, you know, beep, beep, beep. And then we have our telemetry gear, and if you're pointing in the right direction, it's loud, and if you don't, it's soft. So once you get close enough, maybe 5 or 6 miles, then you can use that. Before, we'd have to kind of drive around until we'd come within, close enough to the tag that we could pick it up. Now, starting 2 years ago, some of the tags, we put satellite transmitters in them, so we can actually, before we leave, have a pretty good idea within, 5 or 6 miles of where that tag might be. So now we can get close enough to them that our VHF transmitter can be picked up. So that's been a huge help. Sometimes we'd spend half a day trying to find a tag once they were detached. So we really like the addition of the satellite tags on them. We've only lost, I think, 2 tags in our entire career of, and we've been doing this since 2004, and I think we've tagged over 200 whales.
That's amazing. Okay, so to get to some of our other questions for tonight, I'm fascinated by these bubble nets that these whales make to trap the fish for feeding. And there's a question on bubble nets. Are they unique to humpback whales, or do other types of whales use the same strategy for feeding?
They're pretty unique to humpback whales. Every once in a while we might see a fin whale do something called a bubble cloud, where there's just kind of a burst of bubbles. We're not really sure if that is just an accidental thing or an artifact of some other behavior that they're doing. Lots of whales will blow bubbles in an aggressive situation or something, but humpback whales are the only ones that really blow these elaborate nets. And what's really interesting is that when we first started studying humpback whales back in the late 70s, we didn't see bubble nets in the Gulf of Maine. We just saw these big bubble clouds, the kind of amorphous masses of bubbles that would come out and just cover this whole big area, but no real structure to them. We knew about bubble nets from Alaska because we'd read about them and heard about them, but we'd never seen them. And now, no humpback whales blow bubble clouds, really. They all blow bubble nets. So they've kind of reinvented independently invented this technique that is now used by humpback whales all over the place. But it seems like each population has to reinvent it themselves. Yeah, I've always kind of thought that the commercial whaling probably really did a job on humpback whale culture. One of our ex-students, Jenny Allen, did a great paper, first paper she published, and it was in Science. So that's not a bad place to start. But she looked at that double loop feeding and looked at how it was transferred through the population. And, was it matrilineally transferred, or how did it move through the population? And they just do it out by watching each other. So there's no, the mothers don't teach the calves how to do it, and they move on from there. It's just everybody has to watch each other and copy.
It's amazing.
Yeah, they're pretty plastic in their behavior. That's why humpback whales are doing better than other species, because they're pretty adaptable, because I think they're very intelligent.
Excellent. Actually, that leads into the next question, which isn't on humpbacks, but it's on right whales. In 2017 was a particularly devastating year for the critically endangered right whale, with a high number of mortalities and no new calves born. Can you comment on how the population has done in recent years?
Well, this year there were 10 calves and 1 calf mortality. So that's a little better, right? But the population of right whales has been going down since 2010. Ship strikes have been much more reduced, but entanglements are really the main threat to right whales right now. And they could, unless something changes, right whales could go extinct within our lifetimes when we actually know what causes it, but don't seem to be able to stop it.
Sorry, how many calves did you say were born this year? I missed that.
10 this year that we
10.
know of. 10.
Okay.
And one of those was hit by a boat of unknown size and is probably dead.
So the next question is somewhat related to boat traffic. Has the COVID-19 pandemic reduced shipping activity in the region? And if so, has there been a noticeable effect on whale behavior and activities?
Oh, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we're not out there to watch whale behavior right now, but we are doing something. We're working with Duke Robbins at the Center for Coastal Studies, and Ari Friedlander is part of our project and is now at UC Santa Cruz. And what we did is Duke and her team went out and took biopsies of animals over the last month when there's been no whale watching going on. And so you can look at cortisol levels in the blubber, which is a stress hormone. And so now we've archived all of those this year. When there isn't any whale watching, we will know later on if actual commercial shipping was reduced, because we'll use AAS to actually map the commercial shipping as well. Next year, when whale watching, everything is back to normal, we'll take biopsies again, and we'll be able to see if there was a difference in these stress hormone levels in the blubber this year without much activity around them, and next year when they're going to be resuming much more intensive activity around them. So stay tuned. That'll be very interesting. So I can't answer it now, but I might be able to answer it next year.
Okay, thank you. How are warming waters due to climate change impacting whale feeding, calving, migration patterns, or timing?
Wow, that's a big question. How much time do we have?
Yeah.
The people that know about right whales have been studying right whales. You know, right whales have changed a great deal. They're still going back to the same places they always have. The Cape Cod Bay, Gulf of Maine, Bay of Fundy a little bit, but they've also started turning up in new places, or at least using these places much larger numbers, such as the Gulf of St. Lawrence, where all those drastic ship strikes and entanglements were occurring over the last couple of years. And that really is due to climate change. We're doing a lot with sand lance. You saw a lot of the sand lance pictures that I had and stuff. And sand lance are going to be very much impacted by climate change as well. We did a project with Hannes Bowman at UConn where we captured sand lance in the sanctuary, spawned them, and raised the sand lance embryos in the lab, in Hannes's lab, under conditions that we think are the future ocean acidification conditions of CO2 levels and temperature. And sand lance are extremely sensitive to those things, and the embryos had huge mortality. In addition, copepods are very temperature sensitive, and the nice thing at sand lance is they spawn, now that we know, all this is new stuff, they spawn in a very short period of time at the end of November and start feeding, and don't feed really the adults until February. Now they're in very bad condition at that point. You know, they haven't eaten for many, many months. And if they can't eat during that time period, the adults will probably starve. So we're looking at a future where, not only is the survival, the reproductive success of sand lance going to be reduced, but the adult survival is probably also going to be reduced, which of course will have impact on humpback whales and seabirds and all sorts of things in the Gulf of Maine. So everybody's going to be, climate change is going to change the Gulf of Maine dramatically. And the Gulf of Maine, of course, is warming faster than almost any other body of water in all the oceans of the world. Now, other things will come in. So other species will come in to take advantage of that warm water. So we're going to see more tropical species. They call it the tropicalization of the Gulf of Maine. So we're going to see very, very big differences. Right whales, the things that we like because we're used to them, humpback whales, great shearwaters, roseate terns. Those things will probably be using Gulf of Maine less and less and less in the next 50, 60 years. So other things will use it more.
The next question is, how can genomic tools like eDNA or others enhance or assist in your research on whale ecology?
Well, we're really excited to be collaborating with you guys on some of the eDNA studies. One of the things that we do for our sand lance work is we have 44 stations throughout the sanctuary that we take grab samples to count the number of sand lance there, and at the same time, we count the number of whales and the number of seabirds. So, you know, if we can do eDNA grabs at each one of these sites, it's going to really open up a huge new area for us to look at the ecology of these areas, you know, compared to what we can see and what the eDNA will tell us is there as well. So we're looking at a really synergistic collaboration with your organization that we're all really excited about. So, yay.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that too, as soon as you can get back out to Stellwagen.
We just need to get out.
Yeah. So we tend to hear a lot about the genomics revolution and how the tools for genomics research have become much more powerful and affordable over the last few decades. Has there been a similar revolution for the tools that you use? And if so, what has been the direct impacts on your research? I think you mentioned something about the tag improvements, but it'd be interesting to hear about it.
Yeah. All of these technologies that I'm showing you are within the last 10 years. And you know, the best ones with these high, you know, with these great acoustics and great video combined together into with all these movement data, those in just the last couple of years. And of course, now, as I mentioned, having fast lock GPSs on them, so we can get locations at night, to have the satellite tracking, so you can actually go out and retrieve the tags quickly. Just totally revolutionized things. You know, when I started out, we would sit around drinking beer and go, can you imagine if you could put a camera on the back of these whales? You know, how great would that be? Or hear what their hydrophones, hear what they're doing. And now we're actually doing it. And back about your genetics work, one of the things we're doing right now, again, with Hannes Bowman at UConn, is we've collected sand lance from all over the Western North Atlantic. And we're going to try to look and see how connected these different populations of sand lance are. Is it one population that kind of spreads through the whole area, or is each little area got its own little subpopulation of sand lance that, you know, kind of winks on and off depending on environmental conditions? One makes them very robust to disturbance, and one makes them, you know, very vulnerable to disturbance. So, and genetics is the only thing that can really give us those kind of answers. So, you know, the nice thing is combining all of these things into one way of looking, or one very broad way of looking at things. So it's a new universe in terms of being able to do really ecosystem-based research that we only dreamed about in the past.
Yeah, it comes back to your opening statements about the power of collaboration between scientists and bringing a lot of different technologies and expertise to the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a couple questions here about a mobile app called Whale Alert. So I'll ask the questions, but you might want to explain what that is before you dive into your answer. Can you tell us how the mobile app called Whale Alert gathers information on the location of whales in Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary?
Sure. So to start from the beginning, Whale Alert is an app that we made first for Stellwagen Bank, and we worked with the mariners in the Boston Port Operators Group community to try to come up with a way to give information to them that would help them understand what they were supposed to do for right whales in particular. So there are seasonal management areas where mariners are supposed to drop their speeds to 10 knots and a bunch of other things that they were supposed to be able to adhere to. But of course, there's no signs in the ocean. So, you know, how are they supposed to do that? So we started this app called Whale Alert that we'd be able to visualize on nautical charts anything that the mariners were supposed to know about, so they could, you know, adhere to the right whale conservation measures. So that was how it started. And then once we got it, the mariners said, well, this is great, but why can't we tell you where the whales are? If we see whales, why can't we tell you? So we said, oh, well, we could probably do that. So we integrated a sighting app into portions of the Whale Alert. So you can actually go to it and cite, if you see an animal, you can locate it. You can just actually push a button and it'll tell you where you are and the time and send us the data. of course, you have to know what you're looking at. So now in Whale Alert, we actually have a little ID sheet, actually a fairly elaborate ID sheet. So you can go through it, and if you see a whale, you can go and try to figure out what kind of whale it is from your Whale Alert sheet. And then if you have a sighting, it records the location, the time, and what the species that you enter into it, and then it sends us those data. So it's a really great citizen science tool. So it tells mariners what they need to know to protect whales from ship strike, and then it allows the public to tell us where the whales are, which is becoming really, really important. We were talking earlier about climate change and how that's changing the distribution of whales. So they're not necessarily in all the historic places they used to be. If you don't know where the whales are, it's hard to find them. So the bigger network we can get of people out there looking for whales and reporting what they see, that'll tell us where we should start emphasizing our aerial surveys and other ways to try to get the most out of our research dollars that we can. So that's just one little part of what Whale Alert does. It's now actually used around the world. It started out here in Stellwagen, then we expanded it to the east coast of the US, and we expanded it to the west coast of the US, and now it's in all through Canada. It's in the Arabian Sea. So it's really all over the place, and it's been a really interesting tool to have been pioneering. So a lot of really good people working that. The International Fund for Animal Welfare was a big funder for it, and a group called Conserve.io. I'm not a programmer. Conserve.io is the ones that do the programming. And once we created Whale Alert, they actually then took what they learned to make Whale Alert. And some of you may know Sharktivity, which is a white shark tracking and sighting app. That is a spin-off of Whale Alert. So
interesting.
Big happy family.
Yeah, very, very exciting.
I don't know if that answered the question or not, but
yeah. Another question related to that is, has there been any thoughts of directly fixing hydrophones to large ships that frequent Stellwagen Bank to integrate with Whale Alert and alert individual ships when they're in the proximity of whales?
Well, if you had a hydrophone on a ship like that, the noise of the boat would make it impossible to hear anything else. But we do use passive acoustics very frequently. If you go to Whale Alert, you'll see there's 10 circles right through the sanctuary and the shipping lanes. Those are where we have auto detection buoys for right whales. So there are 10 buoys that have hydrophones on them that are constantly looking for a particular right whale call called the up call. And when it detects that with an automatic detection algorithm, it sends that information up by uranium link to a satellite down to Cornell University, where they confirm that it's a right whale. And then those buoys, those circles that you see on Whale Alert, will turn from green to yellow, saying that there's a whale that's been detected in the last 24 hours in the shipping lanes. There's also gliders. Mark Baumgartner from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute has gliders that are cruising around very frequently in parts of the eastern seaboard that has detectors for right whales, humpback whales, fin whales, and sei whales on it. And you can go on your Whale Alert app, and it's free. Just go to whalealert.org and you can download it for your iPhone or your Android device. And all of Mark's detections will be right there. You see a little map with these zig lines on it, which are the paths of the glider, and any detections are there. And any other passive acoustics devices that are in operation right now are all visualized right on Whale Alert. So we can't do it on boats, but any passive acoustic monitoring that's going on the eastern seaboard is visualized on Whale Alert.
Fantastic. Well, it looks like we're almost out of time, Dave. So I want to just take the last few minutes to thank you very much for sharing your work with us tonight. It's really interesting and exciting work. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much to everyone in the audience for joining us tonight. We hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation, and we hope you'll join us again for future Science Hour talks. Just keep an eye on your email for invitations. Ashley will send out invitations for when the next talk will be. So thanks very much. Also, special thanks to all of our supporters in the audience. As you know, GMGI relies on your support to conduct our research and education programs, and so I want to send out a sincere thanks to you. We couldn't do our work without that support. So thank you very much. Good night to everybody, and we'll see you again next time on Science Hour.